The road to the dacha stretched before us, flanked by towering birch trees that whispered secrets to the wind. I glanced at my husband, Anton, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel in rhythm with the song playing on the radio. He was humming along, a content smile on his face. "You really love going to Mom's, don't you?" I teased, nudging him lightly. Anton chuckled. "Of course, I do. She makes the best borscht, and she actually laughs at my jokes. Unlike you." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't deny the warmth in my chest. It was endearing, the way Anton and my mother, Marina, got along. Almost too well, if I was being honest. There had been times when I felt like the third wheel in my own marriage, watching them chat endlessly about books, gardening, or some old Soviet films they both loved. I had even joked once that he was married to her just as much as he was to me. Anton reached over and gave my knee a squeeze. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking. About? How long it's been since we had a weekend just to ourselves." His smile faltered slightly, but he masked it quickly. "We'll have plenty of those," he assured me. "Let's just enjoy the fresh air, good food, and good company, okay?" I nodded, but a small, nagging unease settled into my stomach. A warm welcome. The dacha sat at the edge of a sprawling meadow, a charming wooden house surrounded by a vibrant garden. As we pulled into the driveway, my mother stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Finally," she called, beaming. "I was beginning to think you two got lost." Anton was out of the car before I even unbuckled my seatbelt, rushing up the steps to hug her. I followed, slower, trying to ignore the small pang of jealousy that flared up in my chest as she patted his back affectionately. Inside, the house smelled of warm bread and herbs, the kind of comforting aroma that made you feel instantly at home. My mother had set the table with all of Anton's favorites: pickled mushrooms, fresh cucumber salad, and steaming pelmeni. "You didn't have to go all out, Mom," I said, but she waved me off. "Nonsense. My favorite son-in-law is here." She winked at Anton, who grinned like a schoolboy. Dinner was lively. The two of them bantered effortlessly while I ate in relative silence, sipping my wine and watching them. I should have been happy that they got along so well, but something about their closeness felt off. Maybe it was the way her hand lingered on his when she passed him the bread. Or the way his gaze softened when he looked at her. I shook the thoughts away. It was ridiculous. She was my mother. She had been nothing but loving and supportive of our marriage. After dinner, we sat outside on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. My mother excused herself early, saying she had to wake up at dawn for the market. Anton and I lingered for a while before heading to bed. I curled up beside him, listening to the rhythmic chirping of crickets. "Anton? I love you." He turned to me, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. "I love you too, Lena." But something in his voice felt distant. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I dreamt of being alone. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the wooden floor. I stretched, expecting to feel Anton's warmth beside me, but the space was empty. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. The house was eerily quiet, save for the soft rustling of leaves outside. A faint smell of coffee lingered in the air, but there were no sounds of cups clinking or footsteps in the kitchen. Frowning, I swung my legs over the bed and padded down the hallway. The kitchen was empty, though a steaming mug of coffee sat abandoned on the table. The back door was slightly ajar, allowing the morning breeze to drift in. I stepped outside. The garden was bathed in golden light, the dew still glistening on the petals of my mother's beloved roses. I spotted them near the old wooden fence, Anton and my mother, talking in hushed voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but something about their posture made my stomach tighten. Anton leaned in slightly, his hand resting against the fence post, while my mother's arms were crossed. Then, as if sensing my presence, she turned her head sharply in my direction. A smile spread across her face, too quickly. Too forced. Good morning, sleepyhead, she called cheerfully. Anton turned as well, his expression unreadable. Hey, you're up. I made coffee for you. I forced a smile and walked toward them. What are you guys talking about? My mother waved a dismissive hand. Oh, nothing important. Just discussing what needs to be fixed around the house. The window in the guest room has been sticking lately. Anton nodded. Yeah, I told her I'd help fix it today. I glanced between them, my instincts whispering that something wasn't right. But what could I say? Stop being so friendly with my husband, Mom. It sounded ridiculous even in my head. So I swallowed the unease. Well, I said lightly, I was thinking we could go to the market together this morning. Anton looked at me, hesitation flickering across his face. Actually, your mom asked if I could stay back and help with the window. You don't mind going alone, do you? I opened my mouth, then closed it. This was nothing. Nothing at all. It made sense, Mom needed help, and Anton was good at fixing things. But why did it feel like I was being pushed away? Before I could dwell on it, my mother took my hands in hers. Lena, be a dear and pick up some fresh strawberries. And those little honey cakes Anton likes so much. Anton gave me an apologetic smile. I'll make it up to you, I promise. I exhaled, forcing myself to relax. Okay. I'll be back soon. But as I walked away, something deep inside me whispered, don't go. The forgotten money. The market was bustling with life, vendors calling out their wares, the scent of fresh bread mingling with ripe summer fruits. I moved through the stalls mechanically, picking up vegetables, honey cakes, and a bottle of homemade raspberry wine. Then, as I reached into my bag to pay for the strawberries, my stomach dropped. My money was still at home. I cursed under my breath, apologizing to the vendor before hurrying back toward the dacha. The walk felt longer this time. Heavier. The closer I got, the more my pulse quickened. There was no logical reason for my nerves, but an unshakable dread curled in my stomach. As I neared the house, I slowed my steps, something in the air making me hesitate. The back door was still open. And then, voices. Low. Urgent. I stepped inside silently, my breath caught in my throat. The voices were coming from the guest room. Heart pounding, I moved down the hall, each step feeling like a lifetime. Then I heard it. A soft gasp. A muffled moan. The sound of fabric rustling, of hurried, feverish movements. My breath hitched as I reached the slightly open door. And when I pushed it, just an inch, just enough to see inside. My world shattered. Anton. My mother. Entwined. Lost in each other. For one agonizing moment, I stood there, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then, the room spun, darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. And before I could even scream, everything went black. I was weightless. Suspended in darkness, where time didn't exist. Then, voices. Distant, muffled, urgent. Lena? Lena, wake up. A sharp sting against my cheek. My eyes fluttered open. Anton's face hovered above me, his brow furrowed in panic. My mother knelt beside him, her hands gripping my shoulders. Lena. Thank God. My head throbbed. The ceiling above me blurred in and out of focus. I was lying on the cold wooden floor. What happened? My voice was hoarse. You fainted, Anton said, brushing damp strands of hair from my face. You just collapsed. Collapsed. Memories slammed into me with the force of a freight train. Anton. My mother. Together. My stomach twisted violently. I lurched upward, shoving Anton's hands away. Don't touch me. He recoiled, his expression morphing from concern to something unreadable. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. They knew. They knew I had seen. I scrambled to my feet, pressing a hand to the wall for balance. My knees felt weak, my breath coming in short, erratic bursts. "Lena, sweetheart, sit down," my mother pleaded. "You're not well." I stared at her. At the woman who had raised me. At the woman who had stolen my husband. And she had the audacity to call me sweetheart? A hollow laugh bubbled up in my throat, bitter and ragged. "Well," I rasped, gripping the edge of the dresser to steady myself. "This is quite a moment we're having, isn't it?" Anton ran a hand through his hair, his gaze darting between me and my mother. "Lena, listen." No, my voice was sharp enough to cut through the suffocating tension. "You listen." The words trembled in my throat, but I forced them out. "How long?" Anton's lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't answer. I turned to my mother, my pulse pounding in my ears. "How long?" A flicker of shame passed through her eyes. Then, just like that, it was gone, buried beneath a mask of forced calm. "Lena, let's sit down and talk about this," she said smoothly, as if this was nothing more than a minor disagreement. My entire body went rigid. Talk. She wanted to talk. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You're unbelievable." Her jaw tightened. "I know this is a shock." "A shock?" My voice cracked. I walked into my mother's house and found my husband. I couldn't even say it. The words lodged in my throat like shards of glass. I turned to Anton, my vision blurring. "You promised me." My voice wavered, barely above a whisper. "You promised me forever." Something flickered in his eyes, guilt, maybe, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. I shook my head, my chest constricting so tightly I thought I might collapse again. "I need to get out of here." I pushed past them, ignoring the way my mother reached for me. "Lena, wait." I didn't. I stumbled into the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I needed air. I needed to escape this nightmare. I grabbed my bag from the kitchen counter and bolted out the front door. The wind hit my face like a slap, but I barely felt it. My legs moved on their own, carrying me away from the house, down the dirt road. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The dirt road stretched ahead, winding through fields of tall grass that swayed under the weight of the summer breeze. My legs moved mechanically, step after step, but my mind was a storm of chaos. I could still see them, Anton's bare skin against my mother's, the way his hands had held her, the way she had responded. The sounds. The betrayal. The sheer filth of it. A strangled sob ripped from my throat. I stopped walking, my breath hitching as I bent over, pressing my hands to my knees. The world spun, my stomach tightening with nausea. How? How could they do this to me? Anton, my husband. The man who had whispered promises into my ear on our wedding night. The man who had traced my name into the fogged-up bathroom mirror after every shower. The man who had vowed to love me, only me. And my mother. My own flesh and blood. The woman who had held my hand through heartbreaks, who had soothed my childhood fears, who had once told me, a mother's love is the most unbreakable thing in the world. Lies. All of it, lies. A bitter taste flooded my mouth, and I forced myself upright, inhaling shakily. I wiped at my damp cheeks and turned in a slow circle. I had no idea where I was going. The market? No. The thought of being surrounded by strangers, of pretending to be normal when my world had just imploded, made my skin crawl. Back to the dacha? Absolutely not. That left only one option. I reached into my bag, my fingers trembling as I fished out my phone. One name stood out in my contacts like a beacon, Diana. My best friend. The only person I trusted. I hit the call button, pressing the phone to my ear, praying she would pick up. 1 ring. 2. 3. Lena, Her voice was light, but when I didn't immediately respond, concern bled into it. Hey, what's wrong? A shuddering breath escaped me. Diana, I whispered. I need you. Silence. Then, firm and unwavering. Where are you? The escape plan. Diana's car pulled up 15 minutes later, kicking up dust along the road. She barely had time to shift into park before I yanked open the passenger door and collapsed into the seat. She took one look at my face and swore under her breath. Lena, what happened? I stared straight ahead, my fingers clenched in my lap. Drive, I choked out. She didn't ask again. The engine roared, and we sped down the road, the Dacia disappearing in the rearview mirror. We drove in silence for a while. Diana didn't push, didn't rush me. She just kept glancing at me, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. Finally, when we were well out of sight of the Dacia, she spoke. Lena. Tell me. I inhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. The words stuck, burning in my throat. But I needed to say them. I caught them, I whispered. She frowned. Caught who? My hands curled into fists. Anton. And my voice cracked. I shook my head, trying again. My mother. Diana slammed the brakes. The tires screeched, the car jerking forward before coming to an abrupt stop. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. I'm sorry. What? I stared out the window, unable to look at her. You heard me. A beat of silence. Then. Those sick, disgusting, worthless, she cut herself off, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Lena, tell me you're joking. I let out a hollow laugh. I wish. Diana exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I swear to God, I will kill him. No, her. No, she groaned, pressing her forehead against the wheel. I don't even know where to start. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cool glass. Neither do I. A heavy silence settled between us. Then, quietly, Diana asked, What do you want to do? I swallowed, staring at the horizon. There was only one answer. I want to leave. The drive back to the city was a blur. The landscape rushed past in muted greens and browns, but I barely saw it. My thoughts were trapped in an endless loop, Anton. My mother. Their hands. Their betrayal. Diana gripped the wheel so tightly I thought she might snap it in half. Every few minutes, she muttered something under her breath. Unbelievable. Sick. Just sick. That witch. I remained silent, staring blankly out the window. The numbness had set in now, dulling the sharp edges of my pain. It was better this way. If I let myself feel too much, I might shatter. Diana finally spoke louder. Where do you want to go? Your apartment? I hesitated. The apartment Anton and I shared was filled with memories, our wedding photos, the couch where we cuddled on lazy Sundays, the bed where he had once whispered that he couldn't imagine a life without me. I clenched my teeth. No. I couldn't go back there. I turned to Diana. Can I stay with you? She scoffed. Do you even have to ask? Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Because no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, the truth would follow me. The aftermath. Diana's apartment was warm and familiar, filled with the scent of cinnamon and coffee. The second we stepped inside, she tossed her keys onto the counter and turned to me. Sit. I dropped onto her couch, my limbs feeling like dead weight. Diana disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bottle of vodka and 2 shot glasses. She poured without a word, sliding one across the coffee table to me. I stared at it. Then, without hesitation, I knocked it back. The burn seared my throat, but at least it was something other than pain. Diana poured another. Talk. I set the glass down, staring at my hands. I don't know what to say. Say whatever comes to your mind. I exhaled shakily. I feel like I'm drowning. Diana nodded, pouring herself a shot and downing it. Understandable, considering you just found out your husband and your mother are disgusting, soulless garbage. My throat tightened. Why? Why would they do this? Diana's jaw clenched. Because some people are just rotten. I swallowed hard. I keep thinking about every moment I ever doubted them and convincing myself I should have known. Stop that. Diana's voice was sharp. This isn't your fault. I let out a bitter laugh. I was jealous of their closeness, Diana. But I told myself I was crazy. That she was my mother and he was my husband and I had nothing to worry about. Diana shook her head. You trusted them. You should have trusted them. That's what normal, decent people do. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. What are you going to do? She asked softly. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. I'm going to divorce him. Diana's lips curled into a dangerous smile. Good. And what about her? My chest tightened. My mother. The woman who had ruined me. I don't know, I admitted. I don't even know who she is anymore. Diana reached across the table, gripping my hand. You don't have to figure it out tonight. I nodded numbly. But one thing was certain. I would never be the same again. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. My body ached from tension, my throat was raw from holding back tears, and my mind felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. For a few blissful seconds, I forgot. Then the memories came rushing back. Anton. My mother. Their hands on each other. My stomach twisted violently, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. Diana appeared in the doorway, her face lined with concern. Lena? I flushed the toilet and leaned against the cool tiles, squeezing my eyes shut. I don't know how to exist right now. She crouched beside me, her voice gentle but firm. One breath at a time. That's how. I nodded weakly. Do you want to go back to sleep? I shook my head. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant reliving the nightmare. All right, she said, standing up. Then we plan. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and met her gaze. Plan what? Diana crossed her arms. Your next move. The call. I wasn't ready to face Anton. Not yet. But my mother? She didn't deserve silence. I gripped my phone tightly, my thumb hovering over her contact. My breath was shaky as I hit the call button. It rang once. Twice. Then she picked up. Lena. Her voice was careful, laced with something that almost sounded like relief. As if she thought I might forgive her. As if I could. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why? Silence. Then, softly, I don't expect you to understand. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Try me. She exhaled. It wasn't planned. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep myself steady. So what? You accidentally fell into bed with my husband? She flinched. I could hear it in her breath. It started as. Don't. My voice trembled with rage. Don't try to justify this. Don't tell me it just happened. A pause. Then, barely above a whisper, I never wanted to hurt you. Something inside me snapped. You didn't just hurt me. My voice shook. You destroyed me. You took everything I believed in and burned it to the ground. Lena. No, my hands clenched into fists. I hope it was worth it. I hope he was worth throwing me away. She inhaled sharply, as if my words had finally struck her. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I closed my eyes, my chest heaving. You can't. And with that, I hung up. Diana was watching me, arms still crossed. Good, she said. She doesn't deserve even a second of your pain. I exhaled shakily. Then why do I still feel like I can't breathe? Diana softened. Because she was supposed to love you more than anyone else in the world. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. She was right. And that was the cruelest part of all. For the next few days, I existed in a strange limbo. I barely ate. I barely slept. My body moved, but my mind felt disconnected, like I was floating outside of myself, watching my life crumble from a distance. Diana did everything she could to keep me grounded, forcing me to drink water, making me small meals, filling the silence with angry rants about how much she wanted to set Anton's car on fire. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. That changed the moment Anton called me. I was curled up on Diana's couch, staring at nothing, when my phone buzzed. His name flashed across the screen. I froze. Diana glanced over, her expression darkening. Don't. But I had to. I swallowed the lump in my throat and answered. For a moment, there was silence. Then. Lena. His voice was hesitant. Careful. I closed my eyes. Don't say my name like that. He exhaled. Can we talk? I let out a hollow laugh. Talk. Now you want to talk. Please. His voice cracked. I know I hurt you. I gripped the phone tighter. Hurt me? My voice wavered. Anton, you destroyed me. You and my mother. He sucked in a breath. I don't want your excuses, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. I don't care why you did it. I don't care if it was an accident, or a mistake, or if you loved her. His silence told me everything. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. So that's it, then. Lena. I clenched my jaw. Was it worth it? He hesitated. That hesitation shattered whatever was left of my heart. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see me. I want a divorce. Anton inhaled sharply. Can't we? No, I cut him off, my voice cold. There's nothing left to save. The silence stretched between us, heavy and final. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, I'm sorry. It should have meant something. But it didn't. I hung up. And for the first time since that horrible morning at the dacha, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt free. The papers arrived 2 weeks later. I had been waiting for them, but when the envelope finally landed in my hands, my fingers trembled. The weight of it was unbearable, years of love, promises, and shared dreams, reduced to a few cold, legal pages. Diana sat beside me at the kitchen table, watching closely. You don't have to do this alone. I swallowed hard, nodding. I opened the envelope. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words blurred for a moment, but I forced myself to read. Anton had signed everything. He wasn't contesting anything, not the split of assets, not the apartment, not even the money he owed me. It was like he wanted this to be over as quickly as I did. Good. I picked up the pen and pressed it to the paper, hesitating for only a second. Then, with steady, deliberate strokes, I signed my name. A deep exhale left my chest. It was done. Diana let out a low whistle. Well. That's that. I nodded, but an uncomfortable thought crept into my mind. There was still one person I hadn't faced. A mother's love. I didn't want to see her. But I needed to. I needed to look her in the eye one last time and see whatever shred of humanity she had left. So I went back to the dacha. The house looked the same, sunlight hitting the porch, flowers swaying gently in the breeze. It was almost insulting, how peaceful everything appeared. I stepped onto the porch and knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door creaked open. My mother stood there, her face unreadable. She looked thinner, like she hadn't been sleeping well. A small, flickering part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. I didn't. "Lena," she breathed, as if my name was a prayer. I straightened my shoulders. I signed the papers. Something shifted in her expression. "I see." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I crossed my arms. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Her throat bobbed, but she stepped aside. I entered, the scent of lavender and old wood wrapping around me like a ghost. The kitchen table still had the same checkered tablecloth. The same teapot sat on the stove. Everything was normal. As if she hadn't set fire to my life. She poured 2 cups of tea, her hands shaking slightly. "I know you don't want to hear this," she said finally, "but I never meant to hurt you." I let out a slow breath, staring into the steaming cup. "You keep saying that. Like it matters." Her fingers tightened around her mug. "It does matter." "No," I said, voice steady. "It doesn't." She swallowed hard. "Lena, please. I don't want to lose you." I set my cup down carefully. "You already did." Her breath hitched, and for the first time, real panic flashed across her face. "You can't mean that." I met her eyes, my heart steady. "You're not my mother anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No pity. No warmth. No grief. Just peace. I stood up, pushing the chair back slowly. "Goodbye, Marina." She gasped at the sound of her name. I had never called her that before. And now, I never would again. I walked out the door, stepping into the golden afternoon light. And I didn't look back. The drive back to the city felt different this time. Lighter. For the first time since that horrible morning at the dacha, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair, carrying away the last remnants of my past. Beside me, Diana stole a glance. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Not broken. Not whole. But free. I smiled faintly. Like I can finally breathe again. Diana smirked. "Good. Because we have so much to do." I shot her a wary look. "Like what?" She wiggled her eyebrows. "Well, for starters, we need to celebrate your independence. New wardrobe, new haircut, and obviously, a night out where I picked the hottest guy in the bar to buy you a drink." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help laughing. "Diana." "Nope." She held up a finger. "No protests. You've been drowning in this misery for weeks. It's time to live again." I hesitated. Then, slowly, I nodded. Because she was right. I had spent too long being a prisoner to my pain. And I was done letting Anton and my mother take up space in my mind. They had already stolen enough from me. The night out. Diana did not mess around. An hour later, she had me sitting in a salon chair, watching as a stylist snipped away the last pieces of my old life. My long hair fell in soft waves around my shoulders, lighter, fresher. By the time we stepped into the dimly lit bar that evening, I felt like a different person. And for the first time in forever, I wanted to be. Diana ordered us drinks, already scanning the room like a lioness hunting prey. "There," she whispered, nodding toward the bar. "Tall. Dark. Brooding. Exactly your type." I laughed, shaking my head. "I'm not looking for anything." She smirked. "Who said anything about looking? This is about you remembering what it feels like to be wanted again." I hesitated, then let my gaze drift toward the man she had pointed out. And to my surprise, he was already looking at me. The man at the bar held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. It wasn't intrusive, nor was it the kind of look that made my skin crawl. It was curious. Intrigued. Diana nudged me with her elbow. "Oh, he's interested." I scoffed. "You don't know that, Lena." She rolled her eyes. "You've been off the market for years, so let me clue you in, that was not a casual glance. That was a, who is she, and how do I buy her a drink, kind of look." I smirked. "You're ridiculous." Diana grinned. "And you love me for it." Before I could protest, she lifted her chin toward the man, who had turned back to his drink. "Let's see if I'm right." Then, to my horror, she waved at him. My eyes widened. "Diana, what are you?" Too late. He had seen. I sucked in a breath as he grabbed his drink and made his way toward us, his stride slow, confident. He was tall, taller than Anton, I realized absently, and his dark eyes flickered with something unreadable as he approached. "Ladies," he greeted, his voice smooth, deep. Then his gaze settled on me. "Can I buy you a drink?" Diana shot me a triumphant look. "Told you." I hesitated, my mind racing. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I wasn't ready to fall in love again, not yet, maybe not ever. But as I looked into his steady, warm eyes, something inside me whispered, it's okay to live again. So, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. I'd like that. Epilogue, reclaiming myself. The next few months were a journey. The divorce was finalized. Anton didn't fight me on anything, and we signed the last of the paperwork in silence. He had tried to apologize one last time, but I had simply nodded, uninterested in his guilt. I never spoke to my mother again. Some might say that was cruel, but I didn't care. She had burned the bridge between us, and I had no desire to rebuild it. I mourned her, not as the woman she was, but as the mother I had thought she was. And then, I moved on. Slowly, steadily, I began to rebuild my life. I started therapy. I changed my job. I traveled. I made new friends. And yes, I dated again. Not seriously, not yet, but I allowed myself to flirt, to feel wanted, to enjoy the thrill of possibility. One day, maybe, I would find love again. But for now, I had myself. And after everything, that was enough.